The owner of the vintage music equipment shop had no idea that the old man in the worn leather jacket and dirty boots was the same person who had changed rock history forever. What happened next would teach him a lesson about value and respect that he would never forget. Los Angeles, autumn of 2014. Among the dozens of vintage shops lining Sunset Boulevard, there was a small store called Rock Relics. Its window displayed shiny chrome, old amplifiers, and replica guitars of legendary instruments hanging on the walls. But the piece that had just been placed in the window that day was the pride and joy of the shop owner, Marcus, a black Rickenbacker 4001 bass guitar, white pickguard, heavy body, and a small tag. Exact replica of Lemmy Kilmister's original Rickenbacker, certified $18,000. Marcus was spending that Thursday afternoon in the back room of the shop. He was cleaning a newly arrived Gibson Les Paul, studying auction catalogs. When the door chime rang, he didn't even look up. "Just a minute," he called out, his eyes still on the catalog. But when he heard the footsteps, he paused. Heavy boot sounds, the friction of leather, and strangely, the smell of Jack Daniels. The man approaching the window was 69 years old. He wore an old Motorhead t-shirt, but it had been washed so many times the logo was almost faded. His leather jacket was covered in cracks and patches. His hair hung down to his shoulders, gray and unkempt. The warts and deep lines on his face told stories of decades on the road. But his most striking feature was this, that tireless, unconquerable posture he carried with every step, as if the world had tried to knock him down 1,000 times, but he'd gotten up every single time. The man approached the window and saw the Rickenbacker. He stopped, tilted his head slightly to the side. Then he put his hands in his pockets and just stared for a long while. There was something strange in his eyes, a familiar pain, or a nostalgic smile. Marcus couldn't quite tell. Marcus finally emerged from the back room. With his expensive designer glasses, pressed shirt, and clean slacks, he looked the complete opposite of the shop's dirt and oil-smelling customer. "Can I help you with something?" he said, but his voice was cold. He'd already sized up the customer's clothes. This guy didn't look like he could afford the prices here. The man gestured toward the window with his head. "That Rickenbacker. Can I take a closer look?" Marcus hesitated. "That piece is very special. An exact replica of Lemmy Kilmister's famous bass, built by an expert luthier." "I know," the man said slowly. "But can I still see it?" Marcus sighed. He walked to the window, pulled out the key, and opened the glass. He lifted the bass guitar carefully, as if it were a sacred relic. "Look, this isn't just decoration. This is an investment. Lemmy memorabilia gets more valuable every day, especially since—" He paused, looking at the man's age. "Especially since he's no longer with us. If what's being told in this video moves you, please hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the unforgettable stories from Lemmy Kilmister's life." The meeting of fake and real. The man took the bass guitar, felt its weight, ran his fingers across the strings, closed his eyes, as if he was listening to the guitar's soul. Marcus watched him, slightly uncomfortable. This customer wasn't like the others. The way he touched the guitar, the way he held it, it was professional. "The weight's wrong," the man said quietly. Marcus frowned. "Excuse me? This guitar's too heavy. Lemmy's real Rickenbacker was at least half a pound lighter than this. From years of carrying it on stage, the body was worn. The screws had loosened. That guitar was almost breathing." Marcus smiled, but his smile was tense. "With all due respect, sir, the luthier who built this guitar has been in the business for 30 years. He studied all of Lemmy's concert photos. He measured every detail. This is a perfect copy. The man turned the guitar over, looked at the back, ran his fingers along the back of the neck. The surface is too smooth. Lemmy had scraped the neck with sandpaper. He hated the feel of finished necks. He used to say, "A finished neck gets sticky when you sweat. We don't want sticky things in rock and roll." Marcus's face reddened. "Are you trying to give me a lesson about Lemmy Kilmister? I've been a Motorhead fan since 1980. When Ace of Spades came out, I was 16 years old. That album changed my life." "Did it?" The man handed the guitar back to Marcus. "So, do you know where Lemmy got that guitar?" Marcus hesitated. "I'm sure. I assume from a music shop." "No." The man pulled out a crumpled pack of Marlboros from his pocket, then remembered he was inside and put it back. "He got that guitar from a pawn shop in 1971 for £250. That was a fortune back then. But Lemmy gave all his money for it. The guitar was second-hand. The previous owner was a jazz musician, and the sound was too harsh for him. Lemmy loved it for exactly that reason. He'd say, 'Too harsh, just how I like it.'" Marcus placed the guitar back in the window. "Are you a musician?" he asked, his voice a bit softer now. "Used to be." The man shrugged. "Now I'm just someone who remembers the old days." "You know a lot about Lemmy." "Yeah." The man looked at the window again. "You're asking $18,000 for this guitar." "Yes, certified, authenticated by 2 different Motorhead experts. I have the documents here." Marcus pulled out a thick folder from under the counter. Inside were photos, measurements, expert reports. Everything looked very professional. Everything looked very convincing. Everything was wrong. The man flipped through the documents, read slowly, stopped at one point. "This report states the height of the pickups, 3.2 millimeters from the strings." "Yes, exactly like the original." Lemmy's pickups were much closer to the strings, almost touching. That's why he got that ugly, aggressive sound. Anyone who smoothed that sound out didn't understand Lemmy's sound. Marcus took back the folder. He was uncomfortable now. "Look, I don't know what you want, but let me tell you something, Marcus." The man leaned on the counter. The smell of Jack Daniels became more pronounced. "Real value isn't in copying. Real value is in understanding why that thing is special." "Thanks for the philosophy lesson," Marcus said sharply. "But I've been in this business for 30 years. I know what collectors want. They want perfect replicas. They want to own things that celebrities used." "Lemmy was never perfect." The man stepped back. "He never tried to be perfect anyway. He just tried to survive." Marcus took something from the other side of the counter. A small metal badge. It had a swastika on it. "Speaking of Lemmy, this is an authentic Nazi badge from 1943, the kind that could have been in Lemmy's collection. $200. Interested?" The man's face changed, hardened. "You know about Lemmy's Nazi collection, but do you understand its purpose?" "Of course." Marcus gave the standard explanation collectors use. He was a history buff. "It was just a collection." "No." The man slapped his hand on the counter. A sharp sound. Marcus flinched. "Lemmy collected Nazi stuff because he was obsessed with the aesthetics of evil. He used to say, 'The bad guys always have the better uniforms.' He was like an art historian. He studied the design of evil, but he never, not for 1 second, believed in that ideology." Marcus backed away. "Please, calm down." "In the 1980s, when he performed in Germany," the man continued, his voice still hard, "journalists called him a Nazi sympathizer. You know what he did? He held a press conference, and he said, "If I was a Nazi, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be killing you." The room fell silent. Then he said, "I'm a history collector, not an ideology collector." You were just selling copies of the real Lemmy without understanding him. The man pulled out a worn wallet from his pocket. Old leather, torn at the corners. He took out an ID card and placed it on the counter. Marcus picked up the card, looked at it, looked again. His face went white. His hands trembled. You can't be. Lemmy Kilmister died in 2015. December 28, 2015, the man said quietly. Cancer. I was exactly 70, but right now it's November 2014, and I'm still here. I've got one more year. Time seemed to stop in the shop. Marcus was staring at the ID card. The man in the photo was the man standing in front of him. Ian Fraser Kilmister. Date of birth, December 24, 1945. Address, Los Angeles, California. My God, Marcus whispered. You're really… I told Lemmy Kilmister his bass was fake. Lemmy smiled. Those famous warts moved. Because it is fake. The guy who made it might be a talented luthier, but he never saw my guitar. He looked at photographs. Photographs lie. I'm sorry, Mr. Kilmister. If I'd known… What would you have done? Lemmy leaned on the counter. You would have treated me differently. That's why I hid my identity. I want to see what people are really like. You saw me as an old drunk in a leather jacket. No, Yes, you did. Lemmy pulled out another Marlboro. This time he lit it. And you know what? You're right. I am an old drunk in a leather jacket. But I'm also the guy who carried that guitar for 39 years. And I can tell you this. That guitar has something your window copy could never have. What? Story. Lemmy sat in the leather chair next to the counter. Marcus was still standing, in shock. Outside, Sunset Boulevard traffic was flowing. People were walking. The world was turning. But in this small shop, time had shifted to a different rhythm. It was 1971, Lemmy began. I was with Hawkwind. We were doing space rock, taking LSD, thinking we were very special. But I needed a bass guitar. I was using a Fender, but that Fender's sound was too clean, too polite. I wanted a dirty sound. Marcus slowly sat in the opposite chair. He was listening to Lemmy, the real Lemmy. One day I walked into a pawn shop in London, saw a Rickenbacker there, black, white pick guard. But there was something odd. The previous owner had changed the pickup configuration. The guitar's sound was metallic, aggressive. You could even say ugly. The jazz musician who'd had it brought it back, said, "This guitar's broken." The pawnbroker couldn't sell it. He gave it to me for £250. That was a fortune, Marcus whispered. For that time, yes, I gave all my money. I had no money left for food that night. But I took the guitar and went home, plugged it in. When I played the first note, I knew. This was my sound. Ugly, angry, unforgiving. That was everything. Lemmy blew out smoke. But here's the thing. The guitar wasn't perfect. The neck was slightly crooked. Some frets buzzed. The pickups weren't balanced. A normal musician would have had it repaired. I didn't, because those flaws were part of that guitar's sound. Why didn't you fix it? Because there's no perfection in rock and roll. Lemmy looked directly into Marcus's eyes. In rock and roll, there's only reality. And reality is dirty, flawed, and beautiful. In 1975, I got arrested at the Canadian border, Lemmy continued. We were on tour with Hawkwind. Border Patrol found speed in my bag. They threw me in a cell. Hawkwind fired me. I was 30 years old, kicked out of the band. I went back to London. I had nothing, just that Rickenbacker. Marcus leaned forward. He'd never heard this story. It wasn't in the books. It wasn't in the documentaries. This was the real story from Lemmy's own mouth. One day, I was sitting in a bar, drinking Jack Daniels. My guitar was next to me, and I said to myself, "Okay, Lemmy, Hawkwind kicked you out. So what are you gonna do now? Give up? Or are you gonna start the loudest, fastest, most ruthless rock band in the world?" The answer was obvious. I started Motorhead that night, in my mind, and that Rickenbacker became my weapon. Hawkwind was a space rock band. We were a war machine. That guitar was like a bomb. Every note, every concert, when I heard that dirty, aggressive sound of that guitar, I remembered the vow I made in that Canadian cell in 1975. I will never apologize. I will never soften. I will never try to be perfect. People used to call me a speed addict. Lemmy lit another Marlboro. They were right. But speed didn't kill me. Jack Daniels didn't kill me. Marlboros didn't kill me. For almost 50 years, every day I woke up and drank Jack Daniels and Coke. Never drank water. Doctors said impossible. They said, "How is this man alive?" "How are you alive?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Lemmy answered honestly. "Maybe my body adapted. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe rock and roll protected me. But I know one thing. If I'd lived healthy, there'd be no Motorhead, no Ace of Spades, no dirty, ugly, imperfect sound. But isn't that an unhealthy message?" Lemmy shook his head. "It's a real message. I never told anyone to use speed. I never tried to be a role model. I just tried to be myself. And myself was a flawed human being. But those flaws made me special." "The press said I slept with 1-200 women," Lemmy said with a bitter smile. "I corrected them. Only around 1,000. But you know the truth? All those women. But none of them really knew me. Every night someone different. Every city a different face. But when I woke up in the morning and found no one next to me, only that Rickenbacker was there, only the music was there. Were you lonely?" "Every rock star is lonely," Lemmy said quietly. "Under the stage lights, you hear 50,000 people cheering. You feel like a god. But when the show's over, you go back to the hotel room. And there, it's just you, Jack Daniels, and your guitar. And you realize that all those people loved Lemmy, but nobody knew Ian." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," Lemmy shrugged. "I chose this life, and I don't regret it, because my music was real. Every note was real. Every concert was real. People weren't seeing a fake rock star. They were seeing a real survivor." Lemmy stood up, walked to the window, looked at the fake Rickenbacker. "You're asking 18,000 for this." "Yes, but, Mr. Kilmister, I'd give it to you now. Please." "No?" Lemmy shook his head. "You sell this guitar. Sell it to that collector from Tokyo. You might even get 20,000. But tell him this. This guitar is just a copy. It has no real value. Because real value is in the story. And story can't be copied." Marcus stood up. "So where's the real Rickenbacker now?" "At my house. I still play it every day. Every single day. Because that guitar is a part of me. That guitar has the trace of every note I've played since the pawn shop in 1971, the sweat of every concert, the scratches from every fall." "Have you ever thought about selling it?" Lemmy laughed. A deep, gravelly laugh. "Selling that guitar would be like selling myself. Never. When I die, maybe it'll be donated to a museum, but never sold, because some things can't be bought with money." Lemmy pulled out a $100 bill from his wallet, put it on the counter. "You got any other guitars here?" Broken? That nobody wants? Marcus ran to the back room. When he returned, he had an old Fender jazz bass in his hands. The neck was broken. The electronics didn't work. This came from an estate sale. It's really garbage. Lemmy took the guitar. His eyes lit up. This is a 1965 Fender. The neck's broken, but it can be repaired. The electronics can be replaced. It'll take 6 months. But in the end, this guitar will be something unique. Because I'll repair it with my own hands. I'll learn from my own mistakes. Is $100 enough? More than enough. Lemmy tucked the guitar under his arm. Marcus, let me tell you something. Making perfect copies is easy. Making real things is hard. But real things are the ones that last. I understand. One more thing. When you sell that fake Rickenbacker, tell him my story too. Because that story is more valuable than the guitar itself. Lemmy walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. And Marcus? You said you were a Motorhead fan. Since 1980. Yes, sir. Then know this. Every time I went on stage for a concert, I saw people like you in the crowd. Motorhead was never about big hit songs. It wasn't for the radio, it was for you, for people who love real rock and roll. So thank you. Marcus started crying. No, sir. Thank you. You've given me the most important lesson of my life. Lemmy walked out of the shop, the broken Fender jazz bass under his arm, the last cigarette from his Marlboro pack in his mouth. He disappeared into Sunset Boulevard. Marcus watched him from the window. Then he took the fake Rickenbacker from the window display, hung it on the wall behind the counter, and put a small plaque underneath. Lemmy Kilmister, November 2014. Real value isn't in the copy, it's in the story. And story can never be copied. 1 year later, on December 28, 2015, Lemmy died. From cancer. 4 days after his 70th birthday. The world mourned, but Marcus knew. Lemmy never really died. Because that fake guitar he hung on the wall now carried a different meaning. It was no longer a perfect copy. It was the symbol of the lesson Lemmy had taught him. When the collector from Tokyo called and offered $25,000, Marcus said no. He offered $30,000. Marcus said no again. This guitar is not for sale, Marcus said, because its value is priceless. 6 months later, Marcus received a package. Inside was the repaired 1965 Fender jazz bass. But it wasn't an ordinary repair. The neck had been expertly fixed. The electronics had been completely replaced. But most importantly, there was a small plaque on the body of the guitar. To Marcus, I learned a lot repairing broken things. You will too. Keep going. Lemmy. Marcus hung that guitar next to the fake Rickenbacker. And both of them are still there today. At Rock Relic's shop. On the wall. Not for sale, because some things can't be measured with money. Some lessons last a lifetime. And every time a young musician walks into the shop and sees those guitars, Marcus tells them Lemmy's story. The arrest at the Canadian border. The birth of Motorhead. The dirty Rickenbacker. The 1-200 women. The Jack Daniels diet. The truth about the Nazi collection. And most importantly, he tells them this. Lemmy taught me that real rock and roll isn't in perfection. It's in imperfection. Because flaws make us human. And humanity is the only value worth preserving. Lemmy Kilmister died on December 28, 2015. But when he walked into that shop that day, he didn't just give a lesson about a bass guitar, he gave a lesson about life. And that lesson, like his music, will live forever. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and like the video. Share this story with someone who's trying to learn from their own mistakes. Tell us in the comments, have you ever met a legend and received a life-changing lesson?